This is the Impressions Exchange Podcast. Impressions Exchange Podcast, where all topics impacting the graphic imaging and printing industry are addressed via in-depth news coverage, analysis, and timely interviews.
Hi, I'm Denise Gustavson, the Editorial Director for NAPCO Media and the guest host for the special Printing Impressions podcast series in celebration of Women's History Month, highlighting women in the printing industry. Now, during the series, I'll have the opportunity to talk with women from all segments of the print industry about their experiences and their journey as a woman. So today, it's my pleasure to welcome Julia Kaufman. She's the Color Production Supervisor at Cushing. So Julia, welcome.
Thanks so much, Denise. I'm excited to chat with you today.
I am so excited to have you with us today. So as we're getting started, can you tell me a little bit about your company that you're currently working for and what your role there is?
Definitely. So I work for Cushing & Company. It's a large and small format graphics printer located in Chicago, Illinois. And my role currently is as production supervisor, assisting the production manager and some other teammates to really just oversee the day-to-day operation and help everyone get all of our work orders out.
Now, how did you get started first in printing? Is printing something you've always wanted to do?
Oh, no. I sort of accidentally found printing, unbeknownst to me that this would become sort of my career trajectory. But I started out kind of as most poor college kids do, needing a part-time job while going to school. And our print department at the University of Illinois, Chicago was hiring for a part-time pre-press operator. At the time, I had no idea what that meant, but needed the job. So
you applied.
Yeah. And so I applied, I got the job, and I started out, and that was sort of my first introduction to the world of print. And ironically, has been my career trajectory ever since.
Now, after that, first entree into printing as a pre-press operator, what else have you been doing? I know printing is still pretty new for you, I think, right?
Yes, I've been with this company Cushing for about 8 years now. And I would still consider that new for myself, but I think I've run the gamut of many different roles here. Starting out, I'll tell you a little bit about my first day at the company. Okay. It was when I was about to graduate college. My brother-in-law at the time had been working here at Cushing and had said, "Hey, we need a little bit of holiday help. Are you available? I think you think this is really cool." So I came in, and the very first day they asked me to weed some frosted privacy film panels. I probably spent like 6 hours doing that, and I loved it. I thought it was the coolest thing. He was totally right. And at the time, my brother-in-law was transitioning out of the company and moving on to a different role. So I was able to talk with the owners and the team, and they luckily brought me on part-time. And as soon as I finished school, I was hired on full-time.
That's awesome. So what were you doing when you got started there?
When I first started, I was a pre-press operator. That was the experience I had in college. And essentially, at Cushing, that role, we all do a little bit of cross training. So it started out mainly on a computer, but what I really fell in love with was the hands-on aspect of being able to see something go from screen to press to print to on a wall. And I still love that today. That's probably one of the main reasons that I love the printing industry so much. But I've been in a number of roles since then. Starting out as a pre-press operator, I moved on to a project manager, which is just a little bit of a level up in helping coordinate with clients and installers and other vendors needed to complete our work. And then on to supervisor, which is what I'm doing now. But I will tell you that we just opened up a new design division under our wing. It's something the company has been offering for a while, sort of not under the table, but not in a very official capacity. So COVID was the perfect opportunity for us to really identify areas we can grow. And so we started a new design department. We call it Sepia Studio. and I am helping lead the charge with that as well. So I've got a little bit of a dual role going on at the moment.
That's certainly going to keep you busy.
Yes, it certainly has.
Now, as you've grown and, during your 8 years at Cushing and Company, is there someone specific that you would say has helped you the most to get where you are today?
Definitely. When I first started, I worked under a woman named Jillian Wickland, and she was my direct supervisor at the time, and really one of the only other women in print that I had known, kind of throughout my career. There have been certainly, other women in this office coming through, but she was sort of not only a mentor to me, but someone I really looked up to coming into this role that I have currently and my previous roles, just because I'll tell you, Denise, she was a badass.
That's awesome.
She knew her stuff. She knew exactly what to say, how to solve problems, how to talk people off the ledge. And I think that is something I aspire to do currently. And really, she's kind of helped me grow the most, growing into the current role I am now.
Mm-hmm. That's awesome to be able to have somebody that really can help you grow, and you can actually see, what she was doing and see yourself in that position even a few years later, of what
Exactly.
you could look forward to.
And I had never really seen a role model or, seen another woman in print kind of being in this sort of management hands-on role before. When I worked at UIC, it was, an all-male office. So it was kind of my first introduction to, wow, this is something that, this is a career path I can see myself on, and I have like a great role model to look up to.
Mm-hmm. Now, have there been any challenges that you've had to overcome because you are a woman in the print industry?
Well, I do think that, starting from 8 years ago to now, it's changed a little bit in that I see more and more women becoming part of the industry. But when I first started out, and even in our city, in Chicago, perhaps it's a little different than other places, but it's a pretty male-dominated industry.
Oh, it still is everywhere.
Yes. And I think that, going to, let's say, a conference, for example, and you're part of like the 6% of women, at this conference, I think that you kind of have to overcome sort of like the imposter syndrome. I think that comes along with being in like the minority of women in the room, and feeling comfortable being able to speak up and say what you think, and know that like you are just as worthy and just as good as the next man in line.
Mm-hmm. How do you get that confidence and that conviction?
Oh, I don't know. I guess there's no secret sauce to that, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that kind of once you recognize that there's maybe just a couple more potholes in your road, you kind of learn how to swerve and to avoid those.
Yeah.
And at least for me, I mean, I've had some good role models here at my time at Cushing. So I think that that's helped kind of propel me into understanding the value of, what a woman can bring to the table, and what someone, like me can bring to the print industry.
Mm-hmm. Now, as we've discussed, it's male dominated. So do women still face issues today because of their gender? Are you still seeing that?
I think that there's also a little bit of age that plays into sometimes some of the challenges that women face.
Mm-hmm.
For example, a younger woman in an office of like older male, print experts might face a little bit of a harder challenge of feeling that their, thoughts and opinions are valid and not lesser than, or not as important because they're younger and because they're a woman. I think that there's some other sort of like inclusion challenges as well. So being part of leadership or management, especially in a very male dominated industry, I think it's a little harder for women to kind of get their foot in the door.
Mm-hmm.
it's really, I think it's just like the open-mindedness of kind of what group of people you're around. I think it's really difficult to say, because I think I've had a little bit of fortune having role models here that are women, and being in sort of like a more open-minded city that is trying to lessen the challenges between genders. I'm thinking that the challenges we're still facing really kind of boil down to more women becoming dominant in this field, more women feeling comfortable taking on leadership roles, others seeing them as leadership material, and really just being able to have a voice and say what you think, and just have the confidence to do that.
Mm-hmm. But now the question is, women that have that confidence, women that are assertive, that's a stereotype. Same thing with, a working mom. How do you approach that, or how do you combat that in the workplace, especially if maybe some of those people that are set in their ways, set in their line of thinking, when they take a look and they see an assertive woman, they just want to have nothing to do with it.
It's challenging, definitely. And I think that you kind of have to take it with a grain of salt. I think people they're gonna think what they want, and stereotypes 100% exist in many situations in the workplace. Mm-hmm. But really, for me, someone being called an assertive woman is not a downgrade. Like, to me, this is an awesome, confident, like badass person. Yeah, is what I equate to assertive. Being direct, being able to provide, thoughtful, and sometimes even blunt thinking or thoughts. Like, to me, that is a positive. And I think, women probably also think, let's say we're getting better at thinking that that's a positive, but mm-hmm. I'm not so sure that men think that's a positive. And so it's becoming our responsibility to kind of change that thinking by being consistent and not shying away from being assertive, and just being kind of who we are, and feeling confident in who we are, and knowing that what we're saying or what we're proposing has value, and is, can be responsible for making a change in other people's mindsets.
I was thinking also that, what also helps is, to help bolster the confidence of women, and to bolster the let that be a badass woman, is when that woman has the education and the talent and the knowledge to back up what she's saying.
Absolutely. It kind of goes back to just having sort of seeing other women in the field, mm-hmm. kind of rising to that challenge. I think about it like when a little girl or a little boy sees, an older woman or older boy on the TV, and there's some sort of like heartfelt commentary about, having representation. Mm-hmm. And I think that the more women that join the print industry and the print field will only help, those existing or others that are facing challenges, to kind of create that confidence, and to start seeing themselves as a majority, or rather as an equal, than a minority. Mm-hmm. And ultimately that'll start to silence some of the naysayers, or those that don't feel that women have a rightful place being an assertive boss.
It even makes me think, the Olympics just concluded, and there was some commercials with, I forgot who the woman was. I forgot her name, but she was in the monobob. But there was a commercial that involved her, a young Black girl watching the Olympics, seeing another Black woman winning, and her aspiring to do that. And then she did. And she's now inspiring another generation of women to go for it, because they can picture themselves, see themselves being there, winning a medal. So in this case, I think, having women in leadership roles, it's not the Olympics, but it is a similar it is similar in the fact
it's
that,
about the visibility.
yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
exactly. Yeah, I kind of had goosebumps as you mentioned that commercial, because that's exactly kind of what I'm talking about. And, we're not necessarily in regards to race, but more so in gender, and just, women for so long have kind of not been like propelled into leadership roles or management roles, and just having, younger, or even, established women seeing others kind of growing into that role, I think will just help kind of that generational and that, gender-wise confidence to realize that, women can do pretty much everything a man can do.
Mm-hmm. Now, characteristic wise, women and men are very, very different. So
Yes.
what is it that really makes women unique, and what do they bring to the workforce that's different? Is it a certain characteristic, certain perspective? What is it? What are those magic things that, women bring?
I think first and foremost, women are very thoughtful. And I don't mean that in terms of, emotional or really empathetic thinking, but more so in that I think women see a bigger picture, a little more, they think a little more globally. And maybe this is just my biased opinion, because I think this about, myself and some of my other teammates, but I think that, we have kind of a gift of being able to multitask, think thoughtfully, think through something sort of to the end, and creative problem solve just in a little bit different way than, some of my male teammates or counterparts. And I don't know that it's better or different, or better or worse necessarily, but it's certainly different.
Exactly.
And I think that what women can kind of bring to the table really kind of counterbalances what a man can bring too. And I think that that's why sort of equal part teammates, or more equal balance between women and men, can really kind of like change the course of a project or a business, based on their involvement, because we think so differently.
Even working with a client, one tactic might work and another might not. I know, between my husband and I, my husband tends to be a little bit more direct in how he phrases things and how he says things. I'll be a little bit more circumspect, a little softer. Sometimes his approach is perfectly fine, and it's perfectly fine for the situation. Other times it can get people off guard, or it can get people to be defensive. So, being able to read a room and read the person that you're working with, whether it's another teammate, whether it's a client, or a customer that you're working with, to know how to balance that, whether it's better for, this person or that person to go and talk to them just based on their personality, and, how they can approach a situation.
Yeah, there's definitely a little bit of sort of intuition, or, butterflies tingling that happens with women being able to, like you said, read the room, or understand sort of the body language and how it's reacting a little bit differently. I think that the perception that women has is very like keen and astute, compared to like the male view.
And honestly, part of it is, I don't want to also say all men are, horrible at reading a room or whatever. Some of them are,
Right.
some of them are, as, they have that same kind of instinctual, they have, their gut, they can really do things as well. And some of them are very, maybe they have similar characteristics that, women have, but I think it's still different.
I think so too. And, my experience with working with other teammates and colleagues is everyone is a little bit different. But I think the one thing that all of the women I've worked with have in common is that they are very detail oriented, and they're very organized. And that's not to say that I have not worked with male teammates that are the same, but it hasn't been all. And so I think it's just interesting, in my experience, seeing the differences between, how teammates and how colleagues work. And, it's in a vacuum, right? So I'm only thinking really about what I'm used to, but
Yeah.
I think that a lot of people probably have similar experiences in seeing, or at least trying to find commonalities between the ways genders are working.
Yeah. And in all the women that I've been talking with for this series, it's very, very similar, and how people are, how women are viewing and how they view their colleagues. It's, so you're not quite in a vacuum. I will tell you that.
Well, that's good. I didn't want to sound like I knew everything about every print shop across the US, but speaking from experience, these are kind of my observations.
Now, I mean, you're 8 years into the printing industry and, you're obviously enjoying it and loving what you're doing. Now, the question is, the industry as a whole, as we've already said, tends to be, skews a little bit more to the male side. How can the industry or even an individual print company try to appeal to more women, to get more women to think of printing as a career opportunity, as a way that they can go, for them?
Well, it's a little tricky because I think that the print industry as a whole is still a little too hidden.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I've spoken to a college class recently about kind of what's involved in the printing industry. And I'll tell you that there were so many questions and commentary from people saying, wow, I didn't even know that, my degree can apply to this, or that this is a real career field. So I think that's kind of the tricky part, is that as a whole, I don't think the print industry is very visible to people in general. What can solve that? I'm not entirely sure.
Mm-hmm.
But for women, I think that sometimes there's, at let's say conferences or trade shows or career fairs, because it's so male dominated, it's sort of again about the representation. It's, women, looking to get into the print industry might not necessarily see other women so visibly. And it just becomes this like cycle of lack of representation and people, or women not wanting to take on the challenge of, let's say, breaking a ceiling or getting into that role because they don't see how it's represented as the whole.
Mm-hmm. No, it's also interesting in thinking about, the print industry and the print industry not being visible. I still remember when I first started, reporting on the print industry, and, people would ask me, well, what are you doing? I'm like, well, I'm a journalist and I cover the printing industry. They're like, what? The printing industry?
What?
Yeah, exactly. It's such a tiny industry. I'm like, no, time out. Think about what you touch in the course of your day that's printed. And, it takes them a while. They're like, well, what do you mean? I'm like, your toothpaste, your carton of milk, your bag of coffee, the signs that you see on the way to work. You start listing all the things that they're touching, from the direct mail that they get to, what they're seeing on the way to work, what they have in their house. And the light bulb will slowly go on.
It clicks. Yeah.
Yeah. And they're like, oh, that's all part of printing.
You know what? That's a wild kind of way to describe it. And I might need to use that, because I've found myself like struggling to describe to people who don't know anything about it how kind of encompassing it is in our lives.
Mm-hmm. And it's one of those things, in a way, print is everywhere and it's become invisible.
Yes.
We're so used to it.
We are so used to it. And I think too, over the last few years, there's been such a big push for so many things to go digital. Mm-hmm. I think some people are under kind of like the misunderstanding that print is dying. And, that's in relative or relation to some book printing or some aspects of the print industry. But I think it's quite the opposite. I mean, we at Cushing have seen such a large uptake in people wanting to kind of put their branding in an environment for offices, for schools, for hospitals. Mm-hmm. So really, I mean, sure, there may be a little bit of dying element in book printing, but I think it's kind of the opposite. We're seeing sort of a revival of sign printing, of environmental graphics, of branding, of people trying to uptake their marketing collateral, because of and from the pandemic. So it's a little bit different. for those in the industry versus those not. But I think for women, sorry, go ahead.
No, go right ahead.
I was going to say, I think for women, it really just boils down to the representation and seeing other women in the field, and also just knowing in general kind of what opportunities there are in the print industry. Because, for you, at least for you, Denise, you're a journalist, whereas if you work at a printer, you're maybe, hands-on with the presses, but it's all still part of the industry. So it's really just kind of opening up people's eyes to what the opportunities are.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, even as a journalist, I've been able to be hands-on. I've actually wrapped a car before, which was really awesome. Cool.
It was so awesome.
But, to be able, for me as a journalist that covers that industry, to be able to go and wrap a car and see what goes and what's involved with that, getting hands-on, it was really cool for me because that helped me to understand it a little bit better.
Definitely. And I think what you're doing right now, even just with hosting this month of women in print via your podcast, is like such a great start to not only kind of announcing, or not announcing, but like releasing to the world all these great ideas from really cool, really awesome women in print, for others to learn about kind of what different roles are available, how others kind of work themselves through many of the challenges that can happen in the industry, and just even what careers or career paths people can go into.
And there's many different ways they can go. There's so many different paths available to them, depending upon what really interests them. They can be more hands-on, they can be in leadership roles and management roles. Really depends on where their skill sets and where their desire is.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So now, as we're coming to the end of this, if you were to give your younger self advice and, about entering the industry, what would you tell her?
I think I would say to not wait for others to clear a path for you, but to rather create one for yourself. And what I mean by that is, if you want to enter the print industry and you want to advance in the print industry, don't wait for doors to open. You kind of need to go after that yourself, put yourself on a training path, talk to the right people, assert what you really want to do with your life, what you want to get out of your career, and kind of don't be afraid to humbly, but bluntly and directly, tell others what you want and what you're looking for, because it's hard for, people can't assume. And once they kind of know what opportunities you're after, sometimes others will help propel you up to that place. So that was a lot. And my younger self, I don't know if I would understand what I was saying at the time, but I think the main takeaway is just to kind of visualize where you see yourself going, and don't wait for that path to materialize, but rather to kind of carve it for yourself.
And honestly, if you don't visualize it for yourself, then somebody else is going to visualize a path for you.
Yes, exactly. And it might not be the one you want to be on, or it might, take a turn, sometimes for the better, but also sometimes for the worse. And I think, being confident is one thing, but being able to kind of vocalize what you want is something different. And that is the better skill, I think, for someone to have.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Well, Julia, this has been a phenomenal conversation. So thank you so much for joining me today. And I'm going to look forward to talking to you again at some point in the future, because I think we have a lot more to talk about.
I think so too. And I really appreciate it. This was fun. And I'm grateful for the opportunity to talk to others listening, and for others to kind of hear some thoughts on a woman in print.
All right. Awesome. Thank you again, Julia.
Thank you so much, Denise. We'll talk to you soon.
Thank you for joining us today for this episode of our special podcast series in celebration of Women's History Month. Be sure to check out the rest of the interviews and stories we'll be highlighting throughout the month of March.